there's all kinds of layers that we could look at this, right? We could look at a kind of a surface layer of what's happening that we can observe. We can start to discern what might be underneath that. And then we can go back down even to the bedrock of how Scripture speaks to seasons like this. And it is clear that God is not surprised by any of what we're experiencing. It is also clear, in my theological perspective, that this is not something God is sending. It is, however, equally clear that this is what happens to a world that gets sideways to how God designed the universe to work, how relationships and relationship with the planet and all of that stuff. So, and you see this just echo throughout, which then leads me kind of back up a layer to say that God has a purpose in this, not going into it, but coming out of it. So he is at work in this for good. And it is that, frankly, that I'm just seeing everywhere. God is not wasting this crisis, if you will. He is drawing women and men to himself. More and more people are asking really important and good questions. There's an openness to deeper conversations. There is, that kind of layer underneath. And then up at the top, people are so far, and for the most part, kind and generous and caring and concerned about one another and checking in on one another. As this thing started to roll out here 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was getting all kinds of emails and texts and whatnot from people that I care about and love, just checking in on Judy and I and saying we're doing it. And then I realized that part of the reason for that was that I was in the target population as an old guy. But
you're a vulnerable population.
I was a vulnerable person, yeah. So that's, but just I think is an illustration of the fact that people's kind of are lifting their eyes a little bit. But one thing that really has settled in is that everybody's experiencing this differently. Both based on, their own foundational place financially and occupation and family and so on. As well as just what's happening to them, how it's impacting them. So you probably saw this earlier this week. Somebody said, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat.
That's good.
That is to say, each of us are experiencing this in very, very different ways and need therefore, and I think one of the things that God might be working on in this is suspending or inviting us to suspend judgment about how other people are processing and managing this.
Will you go a little further on that? I think that's a huge word right now.
Yeah. One of the advantages / disadvantages of this season is that I get to go to 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different churches on a Sunday. I can hop in and out, and regularly and consistently we're hearing declarations of hope and so on. Well, we should. But there is sometimes, I think, a subtle and probably unintended element of that suggests if you're anything other than kind of hopeful in whatever, that you're doing something wrong. You're not faithful or whatever. And I think at the same time, there is just still this rolling gray cloud of grief that is kind of just there for folks. Even those for whom there is not as high a degree of impact as there is for others. Grief is the gift that God gives us to identify and process losses. And we need to get good at it because we are constantly in transition. We are eternal beings with a great future in God's great kingdom, which means that all and everything up until that moment is going to be going away. And we need to get good at letting go of things. And grief is how we let go of things with honor and so on. But this one is not okay, we lost something and now we're grieving it. It is an ongoing sequence of losses. And so it's a rolling wave of grief and sadness that is pretty profound for folks. So pastorally, it's like we need to meet people as much as we can where they are, not challenge them to be where we think they should be. It's a hard place.
I think I just read this recently. David Kessler said, "What is the worst grief in the world? The worst grief is always your grief."
Yeah.
And Brene Brown said, "There's no such thing as comparative suffering."
No,
and
that's exactly it.
I think oftentimes we experience happiness and joy when everything's going great. And Paul's, in prison writing the letters to Philippians, talking about being shipwrecked and all these things and contentment. So joy is an other thing. And sometimes we have to realign our souls to that. But I think right now you're absolutely right. The church can shame people into activity that is not helpful for them when they have yet to process the pain and grief, whatever that looks like. So some people are sick. Some people have lost their jobs. Some people are feeling this enormous amount of depression and grief because they can't go to their gym or go to their coffee shop. And that idea, like what we do in Christian circles is we shame, like, oh, you can't feel bad because you're a mom with your kids at home. And that's not real grief. Actually, that can be grief for some people.
Well, especially, yeah, exactly right. I mean, I think that this is why I think joy needs to be explored at greater depth. Because joy is, as you've identified, it's not happy.
Yes.
Joy is what enabled Jesus to endure the cross. So it's pretty high octane stuff. It's this capacity for life as it is, not life as you wished it were, or life as you remembered it to be, or life as you hope someday it will be again. Joy is firmly anchored in whatever it is that we're in. So that when Paul, back to Philippians again, talks about rejoicing, he's not talking about don't worry, be happy.
Yes.
He's talking about dig back into the bedrock foundational source of joy, which for him, I think, is the crucifixion narrative. It's Easter. It's the bleak, black, endless Saturday. It's the celebration of Sunday, but it's also the bleed out Friday. So it's everything that is the bedrock to joy. That's what enabled Jesus to do that. So for us to rejoice is not put on a happy face.
Right.
It's let grit develop. It's sometimes joy is the only thing that gets you out of bed in the morning and makes you lift your head for even a moment, because it's pretty challenging. You see all of these postings on social media of one kind or another, which celebrate all of the adventures that people are having at home with their kids, and then you realize there's a whole bunch of parents for whom that's just a mind-blowing, mind-boggling. How in the world does anybody have time to do that? And why do their kids cooperate and my kids don't? And then on the other hand, you've got people who would die, who would love to be
in the house
at home with their kids and find themselves in complete isolation. Their kids live in other parts of the country, and on the list goes. So it's all over the map. And joy is what endures. It's what enables us to stay in the game, to not disqualify ourselves, to not quit, to press in. And sometimes it's what joy just enables us to crawl and to hang on to the dirt so we don't fall off,